Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the whole mess of issues around the press conference that the government held a few days ago concerning the rising cases in COVID infections and deaths in the UK. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So first of all, I'm wearing a face mask. It's for a reason, demonstrating something that won't become apparent until later on in the video, I'm afraid, but all will be revealed. So I want to cover a couple of things here as concisely as I can because there are a lot of strands to this complex issue. You could just go on and on and on. The first thing to cover is the political direction from the government, and the second is what the experts are trying to point out about our situation right now, and of course where it's going. So the government first, on the morning of the press conference a few days ago, which was conducted by Health Secretary Sajid Javid, the first one in a long time, we haven't really seen him. But the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, was saying that there was no need to change anything that the government was doing because the plan was working. Holy smokes, what plan is that? Javid later said that the number of new cases per day could hit 100,000. Now, personally, I don't know how likely that is, given that the government do not count cases if you've already been infected before. So if you test positive for COVID, you don't get added to those stats if you tested positive for COVID, say, 6 months ago. I mean, that's mad enough in itself as far as I'm concerned. Not counting positive COVID sufferers just because you've had it before. But anyway, that's what the government believe. What sort of plan means 100,000 brand new infections per day? Because that's what that'll mean. If it does hit 100,000 per day, it means people who've never been infected before, or at least didn't test positive before. And that's the number that will be captured by tests, not the actual number of infections, I'm presuming. Whatever this plan is, I don't want to know. Kwarteng also suggested that the number of deaths, because it's all right them trying to say, oh yeah, loads of cases, but we don't get that many deaths. We get a lot of deaths. You know, that number of deaths, which is still running at about 1,000 a week, was fine, apparently. No need to do anything because we've been through worse, he said. So the implication of that statement is the government don't think we need to do anything unless we get to the worst ever death toll. Later on, Downing Street said that there was nothing to worry about because the vaccination programme had broken the link between cases and hospitalisations and deaths. This is objectively false. It's not a matter of opinion, it's not a spin, it's just plain wrong. When you double the number of cases, after 2 or 3 weeks, you get double the number of deaths. The link is still there. An extremely serious lie that is making the public think that this deadly pandemic is less serious than it really is. The government should be emphasising that this link has not been broken in order to get people to behave more responsibly. In fact, they should also be making people aware that their double vaccination status is worth less as time goes on. You know, those most vulnerable in our population who were the first to be vaccinated now have less than 50% protection from the disease. So all right, the Express going, with your booster you get almost complete protection. They're not protected now. This is due to a combination of the most dominant form being different to the one we had when the vaccinations began, but most especially because the effectiveness of the vaccine wears out over time. This is why boosters are needed for the most vulnerable. You know, something that we are carrying out really slowly. And in fact, this is actually hurting us now. Because we started the vaccination programme really quickly, but we've started the boosters really slowly, we've got a whole load of our most vulnerable in society not very well protected at all. At the same time as we have no mitigations in place. You know, by this point, we needed everyone over the age of 12 pretty much to have been double jabbed and to be well on with getting the most vulnerable people boosted with a third. We've fallen way behind as we get ready for winter. On top of that, we have a new variant of concerns doing the round. Hurrah! The government's decision to drop all mitigations, such as the wearing of face masks, had created the perfect conditions to develop new variants of the virus. We've jammed young people closely together in poorly ventilated rooms in schools and colleges for hours a day. The virus has spread amongst this unvaccinated population like wildfire. They have then taken the virus home and passed it on to adults at varying degrees of protection via their vaccinations. These are the perfect conditions to create a vaccine-resistant strain. Now, we don't know that this new variant, known as Delta Plus, or more boringly as AY42, is worse than the dominant Delta variant? We don't know that. It might be more transmissible, it might not. It might be more vaccine resistant, it might not. We don't know. But as with the Alpha and Delta, by the time we do know, it will have already spread throughout the country, because that's the thing. The way scientists work out its properties is not by going into the lab like on the telly and going, oh, look at this thing, this will behave like that. You know, they analyse what happens in the population that created it. That's us. We are the guinea pigs on this one. No doubt the Conservatives thought that they were protecting the economy. This despite the UK having the worst economic performance of any G7 nation during the pandemic, and the United States aside, the worst death rate. As if there's any economic harm in telling people to wear masks. Although the major concern seems to be indoor gatherings, even where masks are worn. It was recently shown that this problem is genuinely UK-wide, because you may imagine that this is a problem largely in England because the authorities in the devolved parts of the UK are less insane than Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is the most insane head of government or assembly, and therefore we've got it worse in England. It is true that the devolved authorities are less insane, but they still haven't taken all of the advised action. In fact, the figures in Scotland are worse than in England. The problem is that masks are an essential part of the solution, just as vaccinations are an essential part of the solution, but they are part of the solution. It also has to include other things like avoiding close confines in indoor settings and good ventilation where you must have indoor meetings. The Scottish Government still mandate face masks, but they allow large indoor gatherings. This can be likened to putting on a crash helmet as you jump out of an airborne plane without a parachute. The helmet is good, but not without the parachute. But despite the government insisting that their plan is working, they know that we have a disaster brewing. I mean, it's a disaster now. 1,000 people a week dying from COVID for weeks now is already a disaster. And it's set to increase before we hit December. It might be that the school half-term breaks give us some respite for a week, a little bit, but the cases will go back up and so will deaths when they catch up. So Sajid Javid has said that maybe the Conservatives should lead by example. Now, my first thought was, so why do almost none of you wear masks in the House of Commons then? A few weeks ago, he said in an interview that it was fine, they didn't have to wear masks because they all know each other. Apparently, the virus only spreads among strangers. Most opposition MPs wear masks in the debating chamber, usually only removing them to speak. Though, and hence this, I do not see why even this is necessary. When you are talking, you are expelling the most droplets. Why take it off then? Why? Has anyone had trouble hearing me speak in this video? No. But in Parliament on Thursday, a lot of Tory MPs were wearing masks. This was quite unusual. Not all of them, not even a majority. Jacob Rees-Mogg undermined the whole attempt at setting an example to the public by insisting that because Tory MPs were all known to one another and a friendly bunch, they didn't have to wear them. In fact, he actually described them as a fraternal bunch, in a stroke ignoring all the female Conservative MPs. Maybe he means to suggest that only male Tory MPs need not wear masks. Someone pointed out that statements like these were going to lead to this government being judged harshly in the future. Absolutely true. Their failures over both Brexit and COVID will see them vilified in future generations. They will be known as the government of ruin. They are literally the horsemen of the apocalypse. War, albeit trade war, pestilence and famine. Since the government dropped all measures against the spread of the disease, so-called Freedom Day, we've had about 14,000 deaths from COVID. Just a few months. That was over summer as well, where airborne diseases are naturally in decline due to gatherings more often being outdoors than indoors. We're heading into winter now. The government are still not even mandating the sort of measures that should never have been removed. Even in countries that have not been great at dealing with this pandemic, the least they do is insist on face masks. Because what is the harm? Even if they're thinking, oh, well, we don't want to restrict economic activity. What economic activity is restricted by face masks? None. We're not even doing that. I still see a significant number of people wearing them anyway. But in the minority generally, you know, we have a potentially more transmissible variant doing the rounds. The vaccination protection is wearing off. That means millions of the most vulnerable are more vulnerable than they realise if they haven't had their booster. And yet the government seem to think they can get away without measures if they just keep telling people it's fine. I actually think that is their plan. When they say the plan's working, I think that is the plan. Previously, they ordered lockdowns when the hospitals were about to run out of room. I think they might actually let them run out of room this time. After all, hospitals ran out of room in the winter of 2019, before the pandemic, ran out of beds, ran out of trolleys, then ran out of floor space. As long as the media don't tell the public what's going on, and most of them seem to be obliging in that regard, and I have to say on this point, Labour seem to be as well, I really don't understand that one, then the government may feel they can get away with a truly catastrophic death toll and still do nothing. This is a failure of everything. This is a failure of politics, a failure of the media that will again not survive the judgment of history. But they won't care about that. They live for today. They'll have long gone and retired by then, and their replacements will just say, well, it's not our fault. And the institutions will still exist. They will still carry on as usual. But there we are. Those are my depressing thoughts to kick off the weekend. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.